The connection between a parsha and current events, like we could be having a conversation about what is occurring, and even something that is as specific, and it's not, not a general or macro event, but it's something that is a current event in my own personal life and stuff that I'm dealing with. And the ability to draw a connection to the parsha, that's not magic, as it were. That's actually the entire approach that we each have to be taking every single time we open the parsha of the week, because the that is what the Torah is to each and every one of us. It is our instruction manual for life. And as the Alter Rebbe was oft quoted in saying, "As medar leben mit der Zeit," we have to live with the times. The Torah. Why does anybody open up a newspaper? Because they believe in this they will find relevant instruction and guidance and insight for their day-to-day life. Right? That's the purpose of it. It's that I need to be an informed individual, so I know how to best navigate my life, and so I need to be aware of current events, and therefore will inform my decisions, and my directives, because this is relevant information. We can't make a decision without the relevant and up to date information. And so that's the promise, as it were, of any given newspaper. There's a reason why you would spend that money. You'd spend the money and spend the time to avail yourself of the resource. So comes the Alter Rebbe and says, if that's the case, the most relevant thing that you should be reading, the thing that really is the latest and most insightful information, is the Torah portion of the week, because the Torah is eternal and it's written by God, which means that in it I'm going to find, and God is addressing it directly to you. So as much time as you'll spend reading any news site or whatever it is, you would be far better served, even forget from a spiritual perspective, but even from a practical perspective, by reading the Torah portion of the week. In there, you will find the most insightful guidance for your week. And obviously, so to be able to make that connection, to find the clear correlation between whatever it is that is going on in my life and what the Torah talks about, is shouldn't be magic at all. It should be our standard operating procedure.
Rabbi, is this related to that idea that I got glommed onto about 6 months ago, where the holiday, like the Chagim, for example, or a day, is because of the energy of that day? And
yes, so, the day makes a holiday rather than the holiday making the day.
Yes. So is that the same? Is that a similar argument?
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, it is in the same general vein, but I wouldn't say it's the same point, because it's not saying. Obviously, the Torah is the blueprint of the world, so the Torah is also, the reason behind these things, and that's what. And so, in that regard, yes. In that regard, why is the Torah the most insightful guidebook? Because it's not just, you see, a news report is just that. It's a report. It's a report. It's a in a sense, one of the ways to respond to an event or whatever it is to draw on the information, to report what you saw. But it's on the receiving end of a report, is on the receiving end of an event or an occurrence or what have you. It's somebody absorbing an event and then later reporting it, etc. The Torah is an insight into the executive end of an event. Why did this event occur? What is happening here? The Torah is the blueprint of all that exists and why it exists. You're looking. It's less of reading a report and more like conducting an investigation into the elements that have led to this moment, which is a far more insightful. I'm looking into the Torah and I'm looking at the source material, not the report after the fact. And so we were just talking about, to bring you up slightly to speed, what we were discussing was the fact that we sometimes see that even best intentioned education has gone astray, there was a letter written by many of the alumni. Not, I would say by many, it's a relative term. It was a sizable amount of alumni, but it was really, thank God, only a very small fraction of a Jewish school in the Greater Washington area, in which they were writing to taking the school to task on their overly what they believe is an exaggerated disposition toward Israel. They believe that the atrocities that Israel is committing, has always committed, and is committing now in the aftermath of October 7th, should warrant the school reevaluating its approach towards teaching about Israel, and going significantly more in the direction of support for the Palestinian cause against the terrible things that Israel's doing. And obviously, it's heartbreaking that these are the alumni from not only Jewish kids, but alumni of a Jewish school. And so, like, where are we going wrong on that? And it was a little bit of just a kind of a little conversation prior to the start, and it said that there's a discussion that there's something that this week's parsha speaks to on that subject. And let's first set up in a sense, set the stage, as it were, the framework of this parsha. This parsha is the culmination of a series of Torah portions that have, to a certain degree, not only flowed seamlessly one into the next, but also have done something which is comparatively unique in the Torah, which is to leave our end of parsha in an untenable cliffhanger of a kind of moment, like what Hollywood has lately done to ensure that you're going to be back next week, all right, to watch the next show, right? To be continued kind of circumstance, which is starting from Parshat Vayigash. Yaakov wants to settle down. Life is going to be good, right? He's dealt with all the trials and tribulations of first the rivalry with his brother, then the birthright and the blessings, and his brother wanting him dead, which forced him into exile from his own home for 34 years. The most corrupt person in the most corrupt place. He somehow manages to not only survive but thrive in that setting, and then he has to go and on his way home face off with his brother again. And then in the middle of all that journey back, his beloved wife Rachel dies, and finally he's arrived back in the land of Canaan after all of this, and all the sweat and hard work and difficulties and strife and challenges that he's overcome. Now he finally wants to settle down, right? He wants to finally take it easy. Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz Meguri Aviv. Yaakov wants to settle down in the place of the sojourning of his father. He believes he's finally going into retirement because he's arrived back in the land of Canaan. He has forgotten that his father, who never left Canaan, was on a journey the entire time that he was in Canaan. Canaan is not a place for retirement and basking in serenity. It's a place just as much of journey and purpose and mission as was the land of Haran. But Yaakov can be excused in assuming that the land in which he has such nostalgic memories of being able to be a yeshiva bacher and study all day in the tent and all that, and compared to when he had to deal with in Haran when he finally comes back at this ripe old age and having dealt with pretty much all the drama, is that he thinks, okay, it's my turn to kind of sit back and relax and leave the younger generation to the mission, right? So he wanted to settle down in the land of the sojourning of his father. The Midrash says that basically he gets admonished by God and says, "What? I have a whole world to come for you, right? A Gan Eden, for you to bask in serenity. If you're here in this world, if you're alive, that means that there's still a mission. You're still on the field, and there's no retiring while you're on the field. There's no sidelines on the field. There's being on the field." And because Yaakov took his eye off the ball, as it were, he missed the preparation that he needed to put himself and Yosef in place for what eventually becomes Yosef's whole drama, and he feels guilty about that for his entire life. It springs upon him out of the blue, as it were, Yosef's drama. And he feels that he let Yosef down by not preparing him properly because he himself had taken his eye off the prize. Not off the prize, but rather off the ball. And he wasn't as sharp as he otherwise would have been in anticipating that drama and preparing Yosef better for it. Either way, Yosef's drama begins and it carries us through that parsha, the parsha that follows. And here's where it's unique, because even as other parshas, it's this long narrative, but to a certain degree, when a parsha ends, it ends at a place that kind of gives us a certain amount of closure, even in the chapters of the drama, it pauses at a place where we can close the chapter, we can put the book aside on our night table, as it were, and get a decent night's sleep. Except Parshat Vayeshev does not end that way, and Parshat, which was 2 weeks ago, and Parshat Miketz does not end that way. Parshat Vayeshev ends with Yosef having been sold downriver by his brothers, then picking himself up by the bootstraps to work hard and to become the most trusted servant in his master's household. And then his master's wife wants to take advantage of him, and because of his fidelity to his master, he does not engage in it, and that she's spurned, and she takes out her vengeance on him by accusing him of lying with her, and he ends up in the deepest, darkest hole in Egypt, right? And then he helps this butler and the baker, even though life has thrown him another unfair curveball, he still manages to maintain a certain amount of emotional well-being, and he tries to help the butler and the baker, and he says to the butler, please just remember me when you go to Pharaoh. I'm here in this deep dark hole, don't leave me standing. And the parsha ends off, and the butler forgets about him. That is literally the last words of the parsha Vayeshev, and we leave Yosef in this deep dark hole. And as far as he's concerned, waiting any day now for the reprieve, right? And we know it's not going to happen. End of the parsha, right? What really an untenable place to leave it. Is like to be continued, and tune in next week, right? For Yosef's fate, right? Then the next parsha, last week's Torah parsha, opens up. Yosef eventually, right, when it becomes all of a sudden politically expedient for the butler to remember Yosef, because Pharaoh's in need of a dream interpreter. So the butler all of a sudden remembers Yosef, right? And Yosef comes, interprets the Pharaoh's dream, gives him advice. Pharaoh makes him the viceroy of Egypt. The years of plenty turn into the years of famine. And the brothers have no choice but to come down to get food from Egypt. And there is Yosef, right, as the viceroy of Egypt. In that position, he begins this entire whole charade, right? He accuses them of being spies. They say it's not true. We're brothers. We have one who's back with our father in the land of Canaan. Well, bring him down. If not, I don't believe you. I'm going to keep one of you hostage in the meantime. All right. This is an incredibly difficult situation, because they know the father has flatly refused to send down Binyamin, the last one of his beloved wife, and knows what happened to the earlier son of his beloved wife, when he left him in the tender, loving care of his older brothers. How well that ended. But they say, if you don't, then don't even bother coming down, right? And finally, Yehuda says, just I take responsibility. Send him with me, and we would have been back twice over already if you would have just sent him. It's gonna be okay, it's gonna be just fine, right? And so they sent him down. And Yosef receives them warmly this time. He doesn't accuse them of being spies. He receives them warmly. He invites them for lunch. He doesn't invite them, right? They all of a sudden said, okay, you're coming to Yosef for lunch, right? That's what the chamberlain who meets them at the gates says, right? And they look at each other and says, apparently we're going to be Yosef's lunch, right? Says no, you're coming for lunch, right?
What was his name in Egypt?
Tzafnat Panea. So it says,
so they're going to have lunch with Tzafnat Panea, as far as they know.
Yes, as far as they're concerned, they're having lunch with Tovnach B'nai Echad, and they show up. Well, first, again, they think they're lunch. They think they're on the menu, right? And to the point where when they show up, they beg and plead the Chamberlain. They say, please, please, really, it's probably because of the money that was we had paid, but for the grain, but apparently we still found it. So this would only seem to add to credence to the argument that we are nefarious. We have nefarious intent. We don't. We brought the money with us. We brought. Please don't allow your master to take vengeance on us. We are really truly innocent, and we're really really sorry. And we brought we brought the brother. And the Chamberlain says, "Don't no worries, no worries. You're not on the menu. You're not on the menu. You're here to have a pleasant meal with the viceroy. It's going to be great." And Yosef comes, right, and they have this meal, and it's pleasant, and it's beautiful, and he gives gifts, and he gives Binyamin 5 times the amount of gifts that he gives the rest of them, and they give him their gift that they brought with them, and it's all, it's beautiful, a gift exchange like everybody in capital cities and politics do. Here's my gift to you, here's my gift to you, and it's a typical political scene, right, that plays out. And they're on their way out. Shimon is released. Binyamin is okay. It's all been great. They're on their way out. Egypt is in their rear view mirror. They did it. They pulled it off. This is going to be hunky-dory. And all of a sudden they get flagged down, right? There's the Chamberlain again. This is a familiar face, right? And the Chamberlain turns to them and says, what is it? Why would you do this? Why would you repay my master's kindness with treachery? You've stolen from him the goblet, right? And he does, to add to the drama, just to add to the drama, to dig that knife in a little deeper, right? He starts searching all their packs, right? And they say a very, very dangerous line, a line that was said one generation earlier and did not end well, right? And they said, none of us took it, whoever took it, let them die, right? Oh boy, don't say that. It didn't work well the last time. When your father said it, don't get into the habit of saying it now, right? And they start searching, right? He's deliberately started with the oldest one first, right? They check Ruvain's sack, phew, nothing in there. Okay, Shimon, check his sack, nothing in there. Levi, they're going through all the way down. Okay, they come to Binyamin's sack, the last one. They're already thinking like, great, if we get on the road now, we'll still beat rush hour. They're already thinking, past this, and it's all going to be fine and great. And then boom, right there it is in Binyamin's sack. There it is in Binyamin's sack. And the last words of this week's Torah portion is they say, okay, we're all going to head back. And they all get dragged in front of Yosef. And Yosef says to them, don't worry, all of you can go home. I just need the perpetrator, the criminal. He will suffer the consequences. And the rest of you can just go home. Right? End of the parsha. Right there in this most untenable situation. Those are the last words of last week's Torah portion. Again, this is a little bit unique in the sense that the parshas really just leave us in a place of absolutely no reconciliation. We are like there's no a closure whatsoever. We are in the worst and most anxiety inducing moments in the stories, and right there is where we cut the parsha. Because it's trying to make a point. I think it's trying to make a point, which says that this narrative has not been completed.
What was the hint that he gave Binyamin 5 times as many gifts as the others?
Hold that thought. So we talked about in Shul this past week, and I think it's an important point to mention because it sets this up. What was Yosef doing? Yosef, this sweetheart, right? An incredibly sympathetic protagonist. You can really get, on Yosef's side, just the sympathies. This Irani was sold, how heartbreaking, right? Sold by his own brothers in Egypt. And in Egypt, he said, and he worked hard, he pulled himself up by his bootstraps, and then he was betrayed by his master's wife, all because of his loyalty and fidelity to his master. And now he ends up in a deep, dark prison. And instead of losing his humanity, he still cares enough about the butler and the baker, right? And then finally, when he's given the opportunity, right, to to get himself out of the situation. And Pharaoh says, "I heard you interpret dreams." He humbly responds, "No, no, I don't interpret dreams. God interprets dreams." Right?
Good
So
answer.
this is a great guy. He's a great guy. He's a man of incredible integrity. But then give him a thimbleful of power. Oh, not a thimbleful. He was the viceroy of the. He's the vice president of the great of the world's great superpower at the time. But what does he do when his brothers come? Oh, he opens up the gates of hellish revenge, right?
See,
And he puts them
I think
through.
that he sat in the dungeon with nothing to do for days and months and weeks on end, imagining all the different scenarios. And one of them was this one. And so he had
Right.
it all planned out detail by detail.
So you're saying what kept him going? What kept him going is like the creative is like if I just get my hands on it. Oh, if I just get my hands, here's what's going to happen.
Right.
Except that
I don't know why, but for some reason, this thing that who was John McCain spent years in prison in Vietnam, and he said that he would spend all his time playing golf in his head. And then when he
right.
came out, he was like an amazing golf player, better than he was when he had gone in. I don't know.
Right.
I just thought of like, what is it that prisoners do? You know, I
Right.
think he was coming up
If
with
he spent all
schemes.
that time playing golf in his head, never. I feel bad for him.
Exactly.
No, but you know, so you're saying now it's interesting because if the contrast to what you're presenting is what they say, you know, with Nelson Mandela. You know, I'm not going to, you know, people. I'm not going to say that Nelson Mandela was a saintly individual, right? But they say that Nelson Mandela, he had the opportunity to, when he was finally in a position of power, to wreak his revenge, right, on all those, because he was now the one in the position of power, and he
Right, and
didn't, right? He very
he didn't.
definitively didn't. And when they asked him why
Right.
not, he says, well, you're sitting all those decades in prison, and he says because he says resentment is like drinking poison and hoping that the other one gets sick,
It's
right?
right.
Now, having said that,
But I don't think
even
that I don't think Joseph was wreaking revenge. I think he was making
okay,
plans.
so that's
It
the
was a
point.
plan.
Yosef is if Yosef is just taking revenge, then a couple things. Number one, he wouldn't be called Yosef HaTzadik.
Right.
He would not be called Yosef the Righteous. Number two, the Torah would not go out of its way to waste this many words, a parsha and a little bit, devoted to just giving us every last detail of this failure of personality. So it's not that. That, by the way, is probably the clearest indication that this can't simply be revenge, because the Torah would not spend that. The Torah is not a novel, you know, that's sitting there. Ooh, we have a juicy story to tell you, a juicy revenge story, you know, right up there with the Count of Monte Cristo. No, the Torah is a book, an instruction manual on the way we are meant to act. And if Yosef, if there was a cautionary tale, don't be like Yosef, it would give us some basic whatever it is, and basically don't do that. The detail of which it's giving is because there's lessons to be learned about how, in fact, to do. So what exactly is going on here? Yosef, and by the way, it would make Yosef, if what Yosef was doing here was meting out revenge, then he would be entirely disingenuous later when he tells the brothers, "Oh, I bear no grudge against you." Because God is the one who made this all happen. Oh yeah, really? Yeah. Go tell us that when you put us through the ringer, right? That there was no vengeance in that. So go tell Shimon, who sat in prison for all that time. So let's reanalyze the story and say, okay, if it's not vengeance, then what exactly is doing? Because it's clearly very, very carefully choreographed, the entire thing. Okay. So we talked about this. I'm not going to spend that much time on it. But what this is a very necessary and important litmus test. The Abramowitz family, right, from Abraham down, are very aware that they're not living life as private citizens. right? From the moment God told Avram, "You're my guy," it was very clear to all of them that they live a life of a mission. That's not even that. It's not even that they're not that there's that their life is not a private indulgence. It's not even a private mission. They understand that they are the progenitors of an eternal mission. The stakes of their life are incredibly high. God tells Abraham that what you're doing is setting a trajectory that has your children going to be enslaved for 400 years. Then they will receive the Torah and they will be my nation and the land of Israel. And so this is what these people are living with, right? They have a very deep and healthy understanding that they're not private citizens, not only in their generation, but for all future generations. And they carry a very grave and important responsibility. And they live their life and make all their decisions with this in mind, including not just Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, but all 12 of the Shvatim also have this understanding. And this is actually why Shimon and Levi felt justified incorrectly and misguidedly and tainted by their own prejudice, but why they felt justified in getting rid of Yosef. Because as far as they were concerned, and they were correct in this understanding, that without the unity among the brotherhood, they would fail. Crucial to the survival and the perpetuation of the Jewish people was an incredible sense of unity and cohesion. And
Wait a
that
minute, you're justifying what the brothers did?
well, let me get there. I'm getting there. Yes, I'm not. I am justifying. I am saying what the justification in Shimon and Levi. The cohesion of the brothers was all important. If there was anything that was disrupting it, it was an existential threat to the perpetuation to perpetuating the entire eternal mission, and it was a very grave threat. That would be a very grave threat, and saw Yosef as the apple, the rotten apple that is rotting the entire bushel. Why did they perceive Yosef in this way? Because they were jealous and envious, and it tainted and it poisoned their perspective on him. But in their own mind, they felt justified in saying, he is posing a threat to our brotherhood. He is lording himself over the rest of us. He has these delusions of grandeur, and he's therefore creating this terrible, terrible dynamic within us, and we have to remove him.
He didn't have delusions of grandeur, he was grand.
Right.
You know?
But they saw it as delusions of grandeur. Avon avon, is it hamaloch timloch aleinu? You really think you're going to rule over the rest of us? Imashol timshol banu. And so when he's approaching them and they say, here comes this dreamer, the one with the delusions. We have to get rid of him, because we will not survive as a brotherhood if this guy's among us. Right? And that, how do we know that they actually didn't just commit what they, basically cold-blooded murder when they threw him into the pit? But rather, to a certain degree, they were executing a necessary verdict, was because it says, the Torah goes out of its way to say they sat down to a meal immediately afterwards. Anybody want to guess what the Sanhedrin, what the court, the Bet Din, the Jewish court of law, must do after they mete out a capital a sentence, a sentence of execution? You know what they have to do? They have to sit down to a meal, because they need to be able to stomach their decision. So the Torah goes out of its way to tell you that this is what they did. It was misguided, it was wrong. And Yaakov, right, later in next week's Torah portion, Yaakov on his deathbed calls over Shimon and Levi and says, you guys, your passion is dangerous because it taints your judgment. And he deliberately cites and says, because of your desire, you uprooted the ox, right? And that was a reference to Yosef, who was compared to the ox, right? your misguided your passions have you make a bad decision. The two of you can't be together, right? So either way, the point is, what do these brothers do in their tainted sense of the mission or whatever it is? They project on Yosef that Yosef is the cause of the strife among the brothers, and therefore they have no choice but to excise his dead weight.
But this is a sick, premeditated crime. I don't even like hearing justification. But I'm like that with all the bad guys, like the good guys who did bad things, like King David. I can't handle the whole story with the soldier. I just can't handle.
I want to tell you something. Very few people sitting in prison are looking in the mirror and they're saying, I'm a bad man. What they're saying is, I'm a good person.
I know. They all think they're good. I know.
Correct. So this is their justification. Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Obviously, this is projection. It's Shimon and Levi's own jealousy that is the strife in the brotherhood. And to a certain degree, when it says, when they saw how Yaakov is affected by what they've done, right? That they immediately start feeling that they've made it wakes them up. It shakes them out of their fevered, in a sense, misguidedness. Not, well, let's say worse than misguided. And they're like, what have we just done? Yehuda immediately removes himself from a position of decision making among the brothers. Right, the very next section is a piece about Yehuda going on a period of self refinement, self reflection, and refinement, etc. The whole story of Yehuda and Tamar, etc. But all of them are now dealing with 22 years where in the aftermath of their decision. Here's the thing: Yosef is obviously the one most acutely aware of the brothers' failure. They are not ready as a brotherhood to begin the next section of life, the next phase of this eternal journey, unless they have been rehabilitated, unless the brotherhood is once again healthy. And so, what does the Talmud say? How do you test? What is the litmus test of rehabilitation? When somebody has done teshuvah, how do you know that they are truly balei teshuvah?
Put the crime in front of them again, the possibility of the crime.
And see if they're going to make the same decision. What does Yosef orchestrate here?
They could all walk away and leave Benjamin holding the bag.
Well, and not only holding the bag, and holding the bag is not fair. They really think that Benjamin is guilty.
They do?
Why do they think Benjamin is guilty? Sure. Yosef orchestrates
because he got because he got 5 times the presents.
No. What kind of crime is Benjamin being accused of, and what does this seem eerily familiar to?
Well, it's theft.
The crime he is guilty of is stealing a pagan knickknack.
Oh.
Where did that happen 1 generation earlier?
Right.
When the Yaakov and the household had made it out of
Raquel.
Right? Almost made it all. Almost made it the whole way out, right? Lavan comes chasing after them and saying, why your sticky fingers? Why couldn't you leave my teraphim alone, right? Here's the situation. They've almost made it out of a very dangerous situation. They had made it out, right? And here it comes and it says, some one of you has taken the pagan knickknack of my master. And sure enough, who do they find it? In whose possession do they find it? Binyamin. Right. So the brothers turn around and say, you son of a mother. Right? You couldn't leave it alone. You couldn't leave it alone. We were out. That's like your mother. You couldn't leave it alone. So you notice that they never sit there and defend Binyamin and say he's been accused unfairly and incorrectly. That's never any argument. They believe that Binyamin's guilty. Yosef knows how to set this up to orchestrate this, because Yosef is Yosef, right? Yosef, he's not the viceroy of Egypt. He's Yosef, the brother, who knows everything about them. And he knows their tendencies, and he knows what they would believe, and he knows how to set this up. And in the meantime, he has done just enough to make them to stimulate their envy of Binyamin, just like they had the envy of Yosef. What did he do? He gave, right before this moment, he gave Binyamin 5 times as much, right? Sparking and stimulated that envy. So it would be very easy for them, had they if they were the same people that they were all those years ago when it was Yosef's scenario. What would they have? What would they do in this moment? What would they do? And Yosef literally says the words. He says, "Just leave the perpetrator here, and the rest of you go back home in peace to your father. Your survival, all you have to do to ensure the survival of the brotherhood is cut off this dead weight."
Like you cut me off.
He doesn't have to. He doesn't say it again, but it's not. It's. This is a test. He understands that that's the role he has to play here. Are they going to pass this test? Have they grown? Have they realized their mistake? Have they realized that it's all of us or it's none of us? That's the true unity. When Yehuda gets up, and what does he say?
No, we're not all going.
He says, it's all of us or it's none of us. And at that moment, Yosef can't hold it back anymore. And he's finally able, after all these years, to turn and say, I am Yosef, and I am your brother, and we are brothers, all of us, and we are now ready to begin the next stage. Go quickly, tell my father he should come down. We are ready for the next stage. This prophecy that God tells Abraham that the people will be slaves, we are now finally ready to take on that challenge. Because we are a brotherhood. We are a brotherhood at long last. So this is it. By the way, an indication, just to make it even more poignant, that this is what Yosef has been doing this entire time. And this is what Yosef's hope is. There's a very interesting passage in the last week's parasha where it says that once they come down the second time to Egypt with Binyamin in tow, right? And Yosef sets up this whole luncheon, right? Here's the quote. And he gives them each gifts, and he gives Binyamin 5 times the amount of gifts, and he sits and he drinks and gets drunk with them. That's the quote of the verse. Nearly verbatim in English. Very weird verse, right? Does it tell us how many courses were in the meal and what they ate? Like, one, he sat and he drank and he got drunk with it. Why is that a necessary tidbit of information, right? Was it tequila? Was it wine? What was it? Like, who cares what they did? It says, Vayishkeru imo, Vayishkeru imo.
Who got drunk?
Yosef, the viceroy guy. It says he brought them all. He gave them gifts. He gave Binyamin 5. This is the verse.
Why would he do that? Why would he do that?
It says again. Here's the verse. He gave them gifts, and he gave Binyamin 5 times the amount of gifts, and he drank and he got drunk with it. A weird verse, a weird sequence of a verse.
He got drunk with them, so they all
you understand the whole context of what's going on here. This is key and important, and it's beautiful what is being said here. Yosef, since he has been sold into slavery, has been in a state of mourning over the household that has been destroyed. And no wine has ever passed his lips, both when he was obviously when he was not in a situation to have, but even when he was viceroy of Egypt, plenty of wine. But he is in a state of mourning. He is in a state of the mourning of the household that lies currently in ruins. All because of the jealousy and the envy of etc. And he doesn't know if the brothers are rehabilitated, doesn't know if his period of mourning has come to an end. And then he goes and as we said, he triggers the brothers' envy, right? He gives his brothers all gifts, and he gives Binyamin 5 times the amount of gifts, right? And he looks at his brothers, and there's no envy. There's no envy. There's no strife. They're happy for him. And when he sees this, he allows himself to come out of mourning, and he drinks with them. For the first time in 22 years, he sees the hope. He sees the light at the end of the tunnel. And then when he plays the final aspect, the most difficult aspect of it, and they hold up their end of the bargain, and they rise to the occasion, as it were, that's when he finally is able to say, Ani Yosef. Let's move on to the next step. Yes. Go ahead, Les.
Yeah, the Rashi said after the reading, it says, and they drank and became intoxicated with him. And then Rashi said, since the day that they had sold him, neither they nor he had drunk wine. But on that day they drank. Why didn't they drink wine?
Because they saw about themselves also. They saw about themselves also that they were now different. It was a self-audit as well. They watched Binyamin get 5 times the amount that they did. And no angst, no jealousy. No, they audited their visceral reactions. And they saw that they were very different people.
But still, they, as you said, they believed that Binyamin did the theft. So that was kind of a backtrack.
No. In other words, it's not. They believed just because it just seemed, if there was going to be one thing that Binyamin was going to be guilty of, it was going to be something like this. It wasn't. And the point was, they felt even in their belief that maybe Binyamin did this, and the failure of Binyamin, they did not see him as an other.
Right, that's true. But still,
he's ours.
They blamed him for his mother. They figured it was because of his mother.
Yeah, correct. Okay, well, none of us are perfect, but the thing is, there was this old advertisement in the subway. They did a documentary for Giuliani, right after a little bit after 9/11, when Giuliani was New York's hero, but he was still Giuliani, so it's like again, it's hard to it loses a little bit of the feel of this nowadays, because Giuliani's, for better or for worse, has become significantly more controversial. But back then he was the darling of New York, right? Everybody, he shepherded that state, the city of New York, through a very, very difficult hour. And people, but on the other hand, New Yorkers are New Yorkers, and Giuliani was Giuliani. So they had the documentary, whatever it is, and the tagline of the documentary, I remember seeing it and laughing out loud in the subway where I saw it, was so perfect, because it so encapsulated Giuliani, it so encapsulated New Yorkers, and encapsulated the relationship. And the tagline, forgive me for saying these words as a rabbi, but it says, Giuliani, he's a bastard, but he's our bastard. It's like, that's New York, right? And Giuliani and what New York's relation, it was like, oh, that's like, you got it. So it was like, Binyamin was the attitude, was like, he was a screw up in this moment, but he's our screw up. Even if we'll accept that he's a screw up, he's still ours. Whether it's true, whether it's not true, it doesn't change the fact we are not writing him off. He's our brother, and he's going to get our cohesion, our protection, He's one of us, and no matter what he's done, doesn't change that fact. That's the point.
Yeah, and that's the
That's the
point,
point.
and that's an emotion they would never have had before.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. If it was simply that they felt that he was being accused wrongly, then it could just be a logical thing. We're not allowing for this miscarriage of justice. But it's all the more powerful when they actually think that there's a good chance that he is guilty of this. We don't know. It could be he's guilty of this, just like Rachel was in fact guilty. That doesn't change the fact. We're not going to sit there and in a sense litigate whether he's guilty or not guilty. Yehuda doesn't say a word about that. I am simply here to tell you, Viceroy, that it's all of us or none of us. Period. And that's the powerful moment. And that's the story of the Jewish people to a certain degree. Coming back, I think what hurts specifically about in a sense that letter that we're reading is what we lost there, and I think that's the thing we educated. Whether logically Israel's guilty, not doesn't change the fact. What they've missed, what perhaps has failed in the education of JDS in this regard, whatever it is to imbue into these students that it doesn't make a difference. Israel's not guilty. They get our support because we're Am Echad. It's family.
They don't
It's
know
family.
anything about that. They don't know.
It's family. And for example, you disagree with family, but you keep it in private, right? Like the old expression, because family deserves support always and forever. And that was and then part of the letter was saying that we have to rethink, why are we automatically giving more support to Israel than we're giving to the Palestinians? And if that equation comes up in your mind, the argument is not about the logic. Oh, because Israel is less guilty, Hamas is. That's not the thrust of the discussion. That's what you would have to turn to the president of the United States and discuss, right? Because the president of the United States is not part of Am Yisrael. But Am Yisrael has to feel that sense of whether it's not about justified or not justified. We're Am Yisrael. Eretz Israel and Am Yisrael, and there is that existential bond that has stood with the Jewish people throughout the millennia, and in that is the key to our survival, and that is something we can never we can't lose. We won't lose.
We are
and
losing.
This, to a certain degree, is why when Yaakov, before he goes down to Egypt, what does he do? Who does he send in front of him, and with what purpose?
Yaakov.
No, when Yaakov on his way down, he sends
Yehuda.
before
Yehuda.
he sends Yehuda down. What does he send Yehuda down to do?
Form a yeshiva.
Lehorot Lefan of Goshna, to open a yeshiva. We need we need the institution that will teach us who we are. We can survive 210 years in the diaspora if we are making sure that we are educating ourselves on who we are at our core.
And it's the first thing to do.
That's the point. It's the very first thing. Not to teach human values and all these things. Of course, we have to.
But let me back you up a minute. From my generation, my parents, it was the first thing to do was not to imbue me with Torah values, or even Yiddishkeit for that matter. It was to assimilate as much as possible. Don't put a mezuzah on the door. Don't wear a chai. Don't wear a star. Don't wear kippah. Don't keep kosher. So on and so forth. That all disappeared, and there's a large segment of my generation that lost that. Okay,
Well,
and I sent, although they did send me to Hebrew school so that I could be a bar mitzvah. I went to a bar mitzvah factory, and I hated it. And I skipped it, and I threw spitballs at the teacher, and I really did. But when I had kids, I said to my wife, "We've got to send our kids to Jewish day school so that they can get the Yiddishkeit inculcated with the regular learning," and they do that well. And I left it to the school to teach
That
it to
was the
them,
problem with all of us.
as
did that.
opposed to what I
Yeah.
learned later when I got involved with Chabad is that, and the Shema says you should teach it to your children, talk about it every day, and I didn't do that.
Well, I think I don't want to. The truth is, all of us have done great things in terms of educating our children. All of us have done things that we wish we can redo. And God willing, as long as the breath of life is in our nostrils, there's still a lot we can do in any given situation or circumstance. But as you speak about that generation, right, your parents' generation, etc., and what they did, thank God for the Rebbe. Let's acknowledge that as the trend of American Jewry was very much in that direction.
Did I tell you the
Post
story
Holocaust.
about, I go to a Sephardic minyan here, and when a Chabad rabbi, a young Chabad rabbi comes every Saturday because he doesn't have services at the university where he has his Chabad, so he comes. And then they always ask him to speak because he's a brilliant young guy. So every time he says the Rebbe, they go down and they have a drink. And the whole group has every time the name of the Rebbe comes up, they all take a drink.
But I want to tell you something. I say this a lot. They say that Rabbanics get often accused of having Rebbe Tourette's, right? The Rebbe, 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 Rebbe. The truth is, we don't give the Rebbe nearly enough credit. For as much as we acknowledge the Rebbe, we don't, because as you less for what you put. How is it that if that was the overwhelming trend of an entire generation of Jews in America, how was Judaism, in fact, at the end of the day, so thriving so strongly that in Kentucky you can find glatt kosher meat, right? And everywhere in every state right now, there's a flourishing Jewish community. And I want to tell you something. We all know that and don't mean to say this in a way to be disparaging, but without Chabad or without those ideals being taught, without that being in a sense a north star pointing in the direction, had that not been in place, had Chabad not joined as it were the quote unquote establishment of Judaism, if that element didn't exist, I think we can all agree the world would look the Jewish world in America would look very, very different. And it was one man who yes, right, around the entire world, that one man had the vision, and it turned around the entire trajectory of Judaism. And anybody who thinks that is in any way hyperbolic really has not taken the time to study the impact of Chabad worldwide. And the Chabad worldwide is one man, is the Rebbe, is the Rebbe's vision, because that was not Chabad one generation earlier.
Chabad
It wasn't that
was
this was
closed
Chabad and the
down.
Rebbe was just the next seamless steward. Chabad was one generation earlier the answer for what that generation needed. And the previous Rebbe, what he did for his generation is not to be in any way a belittle. But what this generation needed was the vision of the Rebbe, the execution by the Rebbe, and the rest of us, in a sense, who are living this and the beneficiaries of it, only really have to take a moment and appreciate that that's exactly what the Rebbe did. Is the Rebbe sent his shluchim to establish Goshens in every single corner of the United States to make sure that a Yiddishkeit was being taught, not based on logic, not based on feelings, not based on culture, but based on the fundamental principles of what it means to be Am Yisrael. And that is why Yiddishkeit will succeed and survive. And not only survive, but thrive. Until, God willing, we'll all be able to leave the diaspora and go back to the Holy Land with Mashiach. All right, everybody?
Okay.
Can you close the recording?
Recording, yeah, okay.